All right, let's dive right into this explainer. When you hear about the 2015 Clinton Correctional Facility escape, your mind probably jumps straight to those sensational headlines, right? It felt like something ripped straight out of Hollywood, literally a real-life Shawshank Redemption. But today we're going to look way beyond that dramatic manhunt and the, supposed cunning of the inmates. We're actually going to unpack the catastrophic, step-by-step breakdown of a massive correctional system that made the breakout of Richard Matt and David Sweat even possible in the first place.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit the Hollywood escape illusion, the Swiss cheese failure, front gates and night counts, the ignored 2003 warning, and finally, fixing the system. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1, the Hollywood escape illusion, myth versus reality. It's the question that totally baffled the nation back in June 2015. How exactly do two convicted murderers just walk out of a maximum security fortress? I mean, it's really easy to credit the sheer ingenuity of these guys. But what you absolutely need to take away from this explainer is that their escape wasn't just some masterclass in prison breaks. It was entirely reliant on devastating, long-standing lapses in management, basic security, and daily oversight by the exact people tasked with keeping them locked up.
Consider the physical reality of the escape route they carved out. For 3 whole months, these men used smuggled hacksaw blades and chisels to navigate a crazy labyrinth of dimly lit tunnels, eventually cutting their way right through a massive steam pipe to hit the city sewer. Think about that for a second. It was loud, dirty, heavy-duty work, which totally begs the question, how did absolutely nobody hear or see them doing this night after night?
And think about the sheer simplicity of their cover-up. They literally just used painted tape as a decoy to hide the holes they cut into the backs of their cells. But the real story here isn't, how clever the decoy was. The real story is why on earth the guards never noticed an 18-inch hole during their daily operations. Well, the Inspector General's investigation revealed an unbelievable truth. Unannounced cell searches at Clinton were hasty, cursory, and failed to find contraband an unbelievable 96% of the time. They were, for all intents and purposes, completely useless.
To truly grasp how these incredibly obvious clues were missed, we're moving to Section 2, the Swiss cheese failure, aligning the holes. We really need a framework to analyze this compounded negligence, and the Swiss cheese model of accident causation fits perfectly. It's a risk analysis model they use a lot in aviation and healthcare. Picture multiple slices of Swiss cheese stacked up together. Each slice represents a layer of security. Normally, a hole in one layer is blocked by the solid cheese of the next layer. So the crucial takeaway here is that if just one single layer of security at Clinton had actually worked correctly, this whole disaster would have been stopped cold. But at Dannemora, every single layer had holes and they all aligned perfectly. Just look at how these holes lined up. At the front gate, employee bags went completely unsearched. Inside the blocks, guards were actively falsifying night count slips in advance. Cell searches were rushed and somehow missed massive wall breaches. The subterranean tunnels hadn't been properly inspected in months, and down in the tailor shops, tool control was virtually non-existent. That's exactly what allowed civilian worker Joyce Mitchell to just waltz in with hacksaw blades hidden inside frozen hamburger meat. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This really brings us to a damning quote from Joseph Belnier, the DOCS's deputy commissioner. He called it a culture of carelessness, and that perfectly hits the nail on the head. This wasn't just a few bad apples making mistakes. It was an entire environment where rule-bending became the dangerous norm. The small rules were totally ignored because staff felt they just didn't matter. But when you overlook the little things in a maximum security prison, you are basically rolling out the red carpet for catastrophe.
Let's dive into Section 3, front gates and night counts, egregious lapses.
It's wild to think about a specific contraband photo taken inside the prison during this era, showing Correction Officer Eugene Palmer right alongside other guards. The catch? The photo was taken on a contraband cell phone that Palmer just casually carried right through the front gate in his bag, a phone he later let the inmates use. Officers were routinely walking in without their bags being checked, walking right around metal detectors. It proves just how porous the prison's absolute first line of defense truly was. Because think about it. If an officer could just walk in with a phone, a civilian employee like Joyce Mitchell could absolutely walk in with chisels.
Now, let's talk about the number 400. That is just a staggering figure. During the 85 nights that David Sweat was secretly out of his cell, exploring tunnels and cutting through thick steel pipes, there were over 400 required night checks that officers either missed entirely or performed so terribly that they never even noticed a grown man was missing from his bed.
And the reason those 400 checks were missed is arguably the most shocking revelation of the entire investigation. Guards on the night shift routinely completing and signing their night count certification slips hours before actually doing the checks. Let that sink in. Instead of actively confirming inmates were alive and in their cells, officers were just falsifying official documents ahead of time. Sweat literally figured out the guards weren't looking into his cell, which gave him the total confidence to leave and work on his escape route almost every single night.
What makes this whole systemic failure even more alarming brings us to Section 4, the ignored 2003 warning. History repeats.
The Department of Corrections had actually seen this exact scenario play out before. The systemic negligence is undeniable here. 11 years prior, back in 2003, two convicted murderers, Timothy Vale and Timothy Morgan, escaped from the maximum security Elmira Correctional Facility. How'd they do it? They bored a hole in their ceiling, smuggled tools from a prison shop, and slipped away while guards totally failed to notice they were gone during night counts. The 2015 escape at Clinton was virtually identical. The exact same slices of Swiss cheese failed all over again.
So you gotta wonder, why didn't the system learn its lesson? Well, after that 2003 Elmira escape, DOCS leadership basically just disciplined the low-level line staff who were directly involved. They fundamentally failed to implement necessary systemic fixes or audit their other maximum security facilities to make sure those vulnerabilities weren't lurking elsewhere. They basically ignored their own massive warning sign, leaving the exact same doors wide open over at Clinton.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, Fixing the System, Mandating Change. After a massive 22-day manhunt that pulled in over 1,300 officers and cost New York taxpayers a whopping $23 million in overtime alone, the state really had no choice but to force some radical changes. To finally plug the holes in that Swiss cheese, the Inspector General mandated a total overhaul. This meant restructuring the Internal Office of Special Investigations so it wasn't just, guards investigating their buddies. It meant strictly enforcing clear bag and metal detector policies at the front gates, totally banning the pre-filling of count slips, and heavily prioritizing modern electronic monitoring, like putting cameras on the cell block galleries to actually verify officers are doing their rounds. Looking back on this a decade later, experts like the current Inspector General, Lucy Lang, still point right back to that toxic complacency as the ultimate enabler. Because really, you can have all the steel, all the concrete in the world, but if the culture inside those walls is just pure apathy, your maximum security fortress is nothing but an illusion.
It's clear that significant policy changes were desperately needed. Former DOCCS Commissioner Anthony Annucci noted that the department has since rolled out 7 massive volumes of new directives. But, as he rightly pointed out, detailed policies on paper mean absolutely nothing without a rigorous system of internal checks to make sure staff are actually doing what they're supposed to do. The system had quite simply stopped policing itself, and its oversight had to be completely rebuilt from the ground up.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a somewhat provocative thought. 7 huge volumes of new rules are on the books now. But can a massive, highly insular correctional system truly police itself indefinitely? Or, as the years go by and memories of 2015 fade, are we just waiting for that complacency to creep right back in and for the holes in the Swiss cheese to align all over again? Ultimately, no matter how many rules exist on paper, true security is always going to rely entirely on the unwavering vigilance of the human beings enforcing them. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating systemic breakdown, and I'll see you in the next explainer.